I got a bad feeling about this.
Boy, you always got a bad feeling about something.
Sarge, can you hear me?
What's going on, soldier?
We've got contact, lots of them, but they're not Covenant. They're just tearing through us. What the? Oh no!
Corporal, do you copy? Over. Mendoza, get your ass back up to 2nd Squad's position and find out what the hell is going on.
But...
I don't have time for your lip, soldier. I gave you an order.
Sarge! Listen!
What is that? Where's that coming from, Mendoza?
Everywhere. I don't... There! Mira!
Hold still! Hold still! Let him have it! Sergeant, we're surrounded. God damn it, Jenkins! Fire your weapon!
There are too many, Sarge!
Don't even think about it, Marine.
Listen, loco!
Jenkins!
Flood, or Inferi redivivus, Latin for the dead reincarnated, is described as an anomaly in all known biology. The Forerunner records we have designate it as LFXX3273. The Covenant refer to it only as the parasite or the infection. Their method of growth and spread should make them incompatible with any naturally occurring ecosystem. However, the Flood is naturally adaptive and is able to transform hosts and entire environments to suit their needs. They thrive in humid areas such as wetlands and swamps. However, the Flood can withstand temperatures ranging from -75 degrees Celsius or -103 degrees Fahrenheit to 53 degrees Celsius or 127.4 degrees Fahrenheit. In order to further strengthen their capabilities, the Flood is able to convert the environment they inhabit to better suit their needs using Flood biomass, as seen with the Covenant ship High Charity. During initial infection, the Flood can hypothetically infect any living organism. However, the Flood has been shown to prefer sentient life, as assimilating brain matter allows the Flood to increase its overall intelligence from what it infects. Infection is initiated through contact with Flood spores or some form of Flood biomass. Widespread infection can then be carried out by Flood spores and pod infectors, the first and primary created form of biomass during all stages of an outbreak. Pod infectors, colloquially referred to as popcorn, will leap at potential hosts, aiming for the most accessible area of the victim's torso. With armed combatants, this usually entails the left pectoral underneath the neck, as this is left exposed while shouldering a weapon. Upon contact, the infector will tear through clothing and flesh to burrow into the chest cavity, mortally wounding its host. As the host dies, the infector will extend tentacles that tap into the host's nerve center, forcibly reactivating them in place of the host's brain. This is not limited solely to living hosts. As long as the body and nervous system is intact, a deceased host is just as valuable to the Flood as a living one. Once infected, usually by the aforementioned pods, the host will then be converted using Flood supercells injected into the body. The cells will then analyze the genetic code of its host, allowing the Flood to decide how to most effectively use the host. Simultaneously, the Flood cells will break down body cells into raw organic material, which is assimilated into the Flood cells and turned into more Flood supercells. This entire process, from the killing to the complete conversion of a host into a Flood form, can take mere seconds. In order to prolong the viability of a host, the Flood will isolate the host's brain, preventing the signals of brain death from reaching the rest of the body, effectively keeping its host alive as it continues to consume the biological content of the host as fuel. Neurological effects. After initial infection, the Flood will hijack the consciousness of its host and analyze the information within the host's brain, retaining and storing useful information such as technical knowledge and combat tactics. Meanwhile, the remaining memories of the host are stored as part of a whole and are replaced by the primal urge to assimilate other life forms. In a few very select cases, the Flood may utilize alternative methods of infection that does not subdue the host's mind, allowing the Flood to access the host's mind to find vital information in their memories, such as in the case of Captain Jacob Keyes on Installation 04, where the Flood sought information on more planets or a spacefaring vessel the Flood could use to escape. In even fewer cases, if the pod that assimilates a living host is aged or damaged in some way, the host may remain alive and cognizant of their situation, such as Private Wallace Jenkins, who exhibited limited control over his body at certain times. When the Flood has amassed enough sentient life to form a proto-Gravemind, the Flood will become more coordinated, and as a result, they become a larger threat. Physiological effects. After initial infection, along with previously mentioned effects, the Flood will transform the host's body in order to serve the infection's current needs, often called forms, which will be covered later. The process causes the physiology of the host to be completely rewritten, with organ systems becoming decentralized and corrupted, and cavities becoming decayed. The result of this is that incapacitation of a Flood form is immensely difficult, as brute force, decapitation, and high-speed munitions are highly ineffective for killing the Flood. Metaphysical and technological effects. The Flood's most notable method of metaphysical corruption is known as the Logic Plague. It is an abstract form of infection that is carried via informational transmission and exchanges. Its primary use was the subversion and submission of AI. The Logic Plague can be equated most closely to rampancy, as seen with the Cortana AI. The Logic Plague, despite its name, is not a plague at all, much less a traditional computer virus. Rather, as the Flood's intelligence improves, it will instead engage with an AI using carefully crafted arguments and facts to persuade the AI to act in the Flood's interests. This data is then transmitted to other constructs knowingly or unknowingly by the AI in contact with Gravemind. In rare cases, the Logic Plague can even be used on biological persons, with the Gravemind's intelligence allowing it to manipulate living, uninfected organisms and coerce them into carrying out the Flood's interests. There are, as of now, no known countermeasures against the Logic Plague. Notable victims of the Logic Plague include, but are not limited to, Mendicant Bias, a Forerunner AI scavenged by the Covenant, whom later attempted to indirectly assist the Master Chief on the Ark. They are notably the first victim of the Logic Plague. Catalog, another Forerunner AI, was used as a catalyst to spread the Logic Plague by the Gravemind. Cortana, a human-made smart AI vital to the victory of humanity, was placed in the care of Sierra 117, the Master Chief. Cortana was assaulted in various ways by the Logic Plague during her time aboard High Charity, including simulated pain sensations. Her Didact, a Promethean Forerunner who was deceived by the Gravemind and was then convinced his efforts were beneficial to the Forerunners. In an attempt to heal the Didact of the Gravemind's influence, the Librarian sealed Ur Didact inside of a cryptum on the planet Requiem. The Didact was then released 100,000 years later by an unaware Master Chief. There are 4 stages of an outbreak, with one being theoretical. The feral stage is the initial outbreak, the Flood are at their simplest form, communicating via airborne pheromones. The Flood will focus on gathering calcium to establish a proto-Gravemind in this stage. In the coordinated stage, the Flood become increasingly dangerous as they now have a centralized mind in the form of a proto-Gravemind created during the feral stage. During the interstellar stage, the Flood will take control of space-capable technology and use it to spread to other planets and systems, gathering more biomass in the process. The transgalactic stage is the theoretical stage of the outbreak, where the Flood utilizes technology to spread to uninfected galaxies to spread further. The Flood come in many different forms provided in the document. Infection forms are the most basic of the Flood infection, consisting of ground and airborne variants. Flood spores are minuscule airborne Flood forms that spread infection and suffocate potential hosts. According to Ratas Vadum, a Sangheili shipmaster for the Covenant, one single Flood spore can destroy its species. Flood tadpoles are the developmental stage of pod infectors before reaching full maturity, whereas pod infectors are the most basic Flood form, tasked with seeking out terrestrial hosts to infect, and they are the most common form of infector. Seer infectors are airborne form of pod infectors, primarily tasked with the infection of airborne creatures. Pure forms are the result of a Flood outbreak gathering enough biomass to create a Gravemind, and are as follows. Tank forms are large hulking forms that can only be formed by a considerable amount of biomass. These forms are capable of taking and dishing out massive amounts of damage. Ranged forms attack via the spikes shot from its back, however it must remain immobile while attacking. The Stalker form is the fast and agile counterpart to the ranged and tank forms and is used primarily for movement. Infestor forms are forms capable of attacking and infecting vehicles and other machinery. Carrier forms are bloated flood forms that are used to incubate pod infectors and violently burst upon death. Flood spawners are capable of producing a variety of flood forms while on the move. Flood bursters produce a variety of flood forms and release them once internal pressure has reached a certain point. Combat forms usually consist of organic and sentient species that have been infected by the flood. They are defined by one side of the form growing a large claw-like appendage, while the other side keeps the host's appendage for use of various technologies, including firearms. Key minds are the nodes of the flood's collective consciousness, ranging from mobile forms to compounded biomass that spans entire planets. A flood juggernaut is a large flood command form directed by a mass of infection forms linked to multiple hosts. Flood Abomination is a mobile, low-level key mind form capable of combat, and they direct the flood on a local scale. A proto-gravemind is a biomass of hosts for the purpose of utilizing their minds to form a collective intelligence. A proto-gravemind is indicative of the coordinated stage, and after enough time and added biomass is able to grow into a gravemind. The gravemind is the penultimate flood form that serves as the coordinating hive mind of the flood. While they can vary in size and complexity, some graveminds are able to engulf entire worlds. Countermeasures. On a small scale, precision-based small arms fire is considered ineffective against the flood, as the nervous system of an infected host is made decentralized. Weapons, such as the M45 and M90 series shotguns, and the MA series of assault rifles, which are capable of displacing and destroying biological matter quickly, are considered effective projectile-based weaponry to use against the Flood. The Flood has displayed a weakness to extremely high temperatures, thus plasma-based Covenant weaponry, such as the Energy Sword and Plasma Rifle, as well as beam weapons found on the Sentinels on Halo, are effective weapons against the Flood. Additionally, the M7057DP flamethrower is an effective deterrent against the Flood infection. On a large scale, there is no effective way to wipe out the Flood in a meaningful way. In order to completely stop the Flood infection, you must starve them out by getting rid of their food source. This was the ultimate purpose of the Halo array, to rid the galaxy of sentient life, so the Flood would starve. Glassing and orbital bombardments can be used to wipe out large sections of a Flood infestation, and even neutralize a small-scale outbreak, as seen in the outbreak on the continent of Africa. Some humans have exhibited immunity to the Flood infection, one such person being Sergeant Avery Johnson, who was immune to the infection due to his augmentations from the Orion Project, but otherwise there are next to no cases of immunity to the Flood infection. As of currently, there is no known cure for the Flood infection.